You put the phone down. You have not picked it up since. That is where this night began, in the 30 seconds after you put it down, when your hands did not know what to do next, and you filled a glass of water you did not want and placed it on the floor because you could not stand to set it anywhere that was also theirs. The glass is still there. You have not touched it. You have been lying here for, you do not know, long enough that the room has settled back into its ordinary dark, the wardrobe in its place, the curtain edge, the corner, every shape exactly where it has always been, exactly as it was before you knew. And that sameness has become the thing you cannot stop returning to. The room looks exactly like it did before. It has not updated. It does not know. Earlier today, before tonight, you looked at a photo of yourself from 6 months ago, and for a moment, a brief, disorienting moment, you did not recognize the person in it, not because you had changed, because that person still believed they were loved. You put the phone face down and have not looked at it since. The tightness across your chest is not grief exactly, not panic. Something that sits just below both, pressing upward from the solar plexus, sourceless, not warming, not moving. Their breathing beside you is steady, unchanged, completely ordinary. Yours has become something else. You have been doing this alone since the moment you found out. You are still doing it alone. That is what this is. That specific thing. The one with no clean name. The one you could not explain to anyone at work today. The one you have been carrying in the dark while the room holds its shape around you like nothing happened. You are not imagining it. You are not overreacting. This is what it feels like. Exactly this. Welcome to Soulnest. The mind doing it, the returning, the retracing, is not new. It has been running since the moment you put the phone down. What is new is that you have been lying here long enough to notice that it is not stopping. You keep going back to a specific evening, a sentence, the particular angle of something said in passing that you registered and then did not register, the way you sometimes hear a sound in another room and decide it was nothing. You are not going back because you want to. You are going back because somewhere in the sequence there's a seam, a place where what was said and what was true came apart. And the mind, which is very good at this and very bad at knowing when to stop, believes that if it finds the exact location of the seam, something will become bearable that is not yet bearable. It has not found it. It will keep looking. Listen to what is in this room right now. Their breathing arrives the same way it always arrives at this hour, unhurried, unchanged, the sound of a person who is simply asleep, and yours has become something else, not dramatically, just measurably, shallower, held slightly at the top, released only part way, as if exhaling completely would cost something you are not ready to spend. Two people in the same room, two completely different relationships to this night. You are the only one who knows both rhythms are here, and you are the only one who knows they no longer match. The cold below your ribs has not moved. It is not the cold of the room. The sheets are fine. The blanket is where it always is. It is something further in, radiating outward in slow, almost imperceptible pulses, like a system running a process too large for its available resources, quietly rerouting warmth toward whatever it is managing. You did not choose this cold. It arrived with the information and has been there since. It will not be addressed by anything in this room tonight. Here is the thing about the replaying, and this is the thing almost no one says because it sounds too much like being let off the hook, which is not what this is. The mind returning obsessively to a sequence of events after a betrayal is not a sign that something in you has broken. It is the mind doing the only thing a mind knows how to do when the ground it was standing on turns out not to have been solid. It looks for the edge. It goes back to the last stable place and tries to locate the exact moment the floor changed. This is not a malfunction. This is thinking, working at the limit of what thinking can hold. The investigation is not going to conclude tonight. You can probably feel that already, the way the same images return in the same order, the same pause at the same sentence, the same absence of the answer that would make this make sense. The mind is working on something it was not built to process alone. That distinction matters more than it might seem right now. You are awake because you are paying attention. That has always been the thing about you. The paying attention, which is why what happened in the 30 seconds after you put the phone down is worth looking at. Not the decision to put it down. What came after? What your hands did before your mind had formed a single coherent thought. You got up. You went to the kitchen. You filled a glass of water you did not want. You carried it back. You placed it on the floor beside the bed, not on the nightstand, on the floor, on your side, away from theirs. And then you got back into bed and lay down and have not touched it since. No one told you to do any of that. You did not decide to do it. The hands simply needed somewhere to go, and filling a glass was the closest available task. And the floor was where the glass ended up because some part of you could not stand to place anything anywhere that was also theirs. You did all of this before you had words for what you were doing, before you had decided officially that this was the night everything changed. The sheet against the back of your arm is faintly cool. It has not changed temperature since earlier tonight, since before you knew. It is still carrying the texture of an evening that started without incident. A night that had no idea what it would become. Lie still and feel it for a moment. The fabric is the same fabric it has been all week. It has not registered what happened in this room. It is just cotton, holding its faint coolness. Indifferent to the fact that the person lying on it is not the same person who lay down on it before. Here's the thing about what your hands did. They were not confused. That is the part that gets missed in the aftermath. When you are trying to reconstruct a timeline and wondering why you did something as strange as fill a glass and put it on the floor. The hands were not confused. They were managing something before there was language to explain what they were managing. They understood, before you did, that something enormous had arrived, and they did what hands do when the mind goes blank. They found a task. They performed it. They put the glass down somewhere safe and came back. There is something worth holding in that. not as comfort exactly, more as information. The part of you that moved through those 30 seconds without instruction, that got up, that filled the glass, that made the small, deliberate choice of the floor and not the nightstand. That part was not falling apart. It was already working, already doing what needed to be done in the absence of anything else to do. The improvisation of a person who has just received something their mind cannot yet hold. Finding the smallest possible task and completing it. The glass is still there, room temperature now, probably. You brought it after knowing, and you have not touched it since, and it has been sitting beside the bed doing nothing, which is its own kind of faithful. You got through those 30 seconds. You are still getting through. And somewhere in the middle of that, you have probably noticed the cold, not the room. The room is the same temperature it always is. The blanket is where it should be. The sheet is where it should be. And none of that is the problem. The cold is somewhere below the blanket's reach, below the surface of the skin entirely. It sits closest to the solar plexus, not sharp, not dramatic, but present in slow pulses, radiating outward at intervals, the way a sound travels through water rather than air. You may have been trying to locate it more precisely and finding that you cannot. That is because it does not have a precise location. It is internal in a way that has no external address. You have probably also tried, at some point tonight, to warm it, pulled the blanket higher, shifted toward the heat of the person beside you, or away from them, or stayed exactly still and waited for it to pass. It has not passed. It will not be reached by anything in this room. Here is what the cold actually is, because you deserve a name for it. It is not grief cold. Grief has a different register. It moves differently, sits differently, announces itself differently. And it is not shock cold either, not the sudden onset cold of a system seizing up. This cold is slower than shock, more continuous. It is the specific temperature of a process running at full capacity in the background, rerouting warmth away from the surface to keep something enormous operational. You received information tonight that your mind has not finished processing, and processing it requires resources, and resources have to come from somewhere. And so the warmth that would ordinarily reach the surface has been quietly redirected. What you are feeling is not a symptom of falling apart. It is the sensation of something working very hard on your behalf. The wardrobe stands in the dark in its exact position. The curtain edge, the corner, every shape unchanged, holding its place as if tonight were the same as any other night, as if nothing in this room has shifted. The room is entirely convincing in its sameness. The cold in your solar plexus is the only thing in this room that is telling the truth about what happened here. There is something almost clarifying in that, if you can hold it steady for a moment. Not comfort. The cold is real, and it is not going anywhere tonight, but information. The mind can be talked to, reasoned with, distracted. It can perform a version of fine with some effort and a reasonable night's sleep. What is happening below your ribs right now is not performing anything. It registered exactly what arrived. It is responding at exactly the scale the situation warrants. You cannot override it. and you cannot warm it from outside because it is not a surface problem. You do not have to fix it tonight. It is not asking to be fixed. It is asking, in the only language available to it, to be acknowledged, to have someone say, yes, that is real, that is proportionate. That is what it feels like when something this large arrives and has nowhere yet to land. That is what it feels like. And there is no one in this room who knows that except you. At some point in the last few minutes, they moved. A small adjustment, a shift of weight, a breath that changed rhythm for a moment, and then returned to its usual pace. Unconscious, undeliberate, the movement of a person whose sleep is going exactly as sleep is supposed to go. They resettled and went quiet again, and you felt it without looking, and you have not moved at all. Notice that. You have been lying almost completely still for, you are not sure how long, not because you decided to, because something in you understood, without being told, that stillness was required, that moving might wake them, and that you have not yet decided what happens when they wake. This is the thing that has no name in the available language for nights like this. You are the only conscious person in this room, and you are holding something that was always going to require two people, and one of them is asleep. Their breathing arrives at its regular interval, unchanged, unhurried, the sound of someone with no outstanding business in this night. And yours is still what it has been for hours now. Shallower, held, managed at the top of the chest in a way that requires small, continuous effort you did not agree to expend. Two people, the same room. One of them knows. One of them is resting. There is a specific quality to this kind of alone, not the alone of an empty apartment or a silent phone, but the alone of a secret held in a room with the person the secret is about. You cannot name it to them. You cannot ask for help carrying it. You cannot even shift position freely, because shifting position is something a person does when they are comfortable, and comfort is not currently on the list of available options. You are the only one in this room doing any work tonight. The glass on the floor beside the bed, you put it there in those first 30 seconds because the hands needed a task. They still do. There is nothing left for them to do. Here is the truth that this night will eventually make clear, though it will take longer than tonight to fully arrive. This is not simply a night you cannot sleep. It is the first night you have ever been in possession of something the person beside you does not know. Every night before this, whatever you carried, they were at least nominally available to share it. Tonight, the information belongs only to you, and the carrying belongs only to you, and the wakefulness belongs only to you, and the stillness that protects their sleep is something you are choosing right now, whether you mean to or not. That is not a small thing to be doing at this hour. You have been doing it since the moment you put the phone down. The getting up, the glass, the lying back down, the not moving, all of it has been yours to manage, and you have been managing it. And no one in this room knows that except you. That counts as something, even now, especially now. And you have not told a single person, not your closest friend, Not the one who would pick up at this hour probably if you called. Not the person you would normally tell first, whose number you have probably looked at once or twice in the last 2 days and then put the phone face down again. You have gone to work. You have answered what needed answering. At some point yesterday, someone told you something about their weekend, and you responded in a way that passed. A nod, a small sound of acknowledgement, the correct muscles in your face doing what they are supposed to do, and they had no idea, and you kept moving, and the information stayed exactly where it was. You have been carrying this in a very specific way, not suppressed. Suppression requires force, requires holding something down against its will. What you have been doing is more deliberate than that. You have been keeping it intact, unspoken, still entirely yours in the form it arrived. Before anyone else's reaction or language or concern had a chance to reshape it into something you would then have to manage. Notice what your breath is doing right now. There is a moment, it keeps arriving, where an exhale begins and then stops partway, not fully released, caught somewhere in the middle of the chest, held there, before the next inhale comes to replace it, as if breathing out completely would make a sound, as if the full exhale would be audible in a way that shallow breathing is not. The breath has learned the same containment as the mind, keeping the surface still, not making anything visible that isn't already visible. This is not avoidance. That distinction matters, and almost no one makes it. Avoidance is the choice not to look at something. What you have been doing is the opposite. You have been looking at it constantly, in full, alone, without putting it into the reduced and translated form that telling someone would require. The moment this becomes a story you tell, it changes. It acquires the shape of the telling. It picks up other people's responses as part of its texture, their worry or their anger or their careful neutrality, and those things become part of what it is. Right now, it is still only what it actually is. You are the only keeper of it in its original form. There's a cost to that. The cost is this: the held exhale, the face performing fine, the weight of being the sole person in any given room who knows what this room actually contains. You have been paying that cost for days. It is real and it is exhausting, and it is also, underneath the exhaustion, a form of care for the thing itself, for the right to hold it a little longer in the shape it arrived before the world gets its hands on it and begins the work of making it into something manageable. Silence is not an absence of response. It is its own response, active, chosen, costing something. The breath that stops halfway is not a failure to breathe. It is the shape of a decision being made, again, in real time. You are still making it. That is yours. And at some point tonight, between one breath and the next, you became aware of the room, the wardrobe, the curtain edge, the corner where the wall meets the ceiling, each shape exactly where it has always been, exactly as it was this morning, exactly as it was before you knew. The room is dark the way this room is always dark at this hour, not deeper, not different, not marked in any way by what happened inside it tonight. If you had walked in from outside just now, you would have seen a room where 2 people are sleeping. you would have seen nothing unusual. The room would have told you nothing. This is the thing that is quietly unbearable about it. Not that the room is cold or strange or hostile, but that it is precisely, exactly itself. The wardrobe is not an inch from where it always stands. The curtain catches the same faint suggestion of light at its edge that it always catches. The corner holds its familiar shadow. You have been lying in this room for hours, and nothing in it has adjusted to account for what you now know. And there is something in that, something you have been feeling without quite naming, that sits like a second wrongness alongside the first. You expected the room to know. Of course you did. That is not an unreasonable expectation. It is simply an impossible one. The expectation that the world would register the change that registered so completely inside you. That the wardrobe would be somehow different. That the dark would feel different. That the curtain edge would be sitting at a slightly different angle because everything is now at a slightly different angle. It did not happen. The room has continued at its exact temperature, in its exact configuration, in total indifference to the information that arrived here tonight. And here is what that indifference is actually doing, though it does not feel like this yet. It is drawing a line, a faint one, between what happened and where what happened lives. The wardrobe did not change because what changed is not in the wardrobe. The curtain edge held its position because what shifted did not shift in the curtain. The room stayed the same because the room was never the location of the thing that mattered. You are. What arrived tonight arrived into you, not into the furniture, which means the furniture was always going to remain exactly as it was, which means the furniture, in its complete unhelpful neutrality, is accidentally telling you something true. The glass on the floor has not moved either. It is sitting where you placed it, floor, not nightstand, your side, in the position your hands chose without instruction. It has not updated. It is just a glass, holding its position in the dark, asking nothing of you. Notice the cold is still present, still below the ribs, still pulsing at its slow, irregular interval. And notice also that the wardrobe does not require you to do anything about it. The curtain edge is not waiting for your resolution. The corner is not tracking your progress. The room will look the same tomorrow. It looked the same before. That sameness is not a failure. It is simply where you are, the one thing in it that changed. And at some point in the last hour, you moved your eyes to the ceiling and left them there. Not because there is anything on the ceiling. There is nothing on the ceiling. That is precisely why you are looking at it. The ceiling is the only surface in this room that is not theirs, not shared, not implicated. The wardrobe holds clothes you have seen them wear. The curtain edge frames a window you have both looked out of. The space beside you in the bed is not something you can look at. So you are looking at the ceiling, which has never asked anything of either of you, and which is, at this hour, the only neutral territory available. Notice the jaw, not clenched. It is not quite that. More like held, maintained at a position that is not fully relaxed, a position the muscles have been sustaining for long enough that they have stopped registering the effort. The jaw is doing a specific kind of work. It is holding the face in an arrangement that would be acceptable if the person beside you opened their eyes right now. You have been performing a face. Not for them exactly. They are asleep. They have not looked at you in hours, but against the possibility of being looked at. The performance has been running in the background this entire time, consuming something. The way a screen left on in another room consumes power you forgot to account for. This is what no one names about nights like this. You have been managing two things simultaneously: the information itself and the face you are wearing while you manage it, the investigation running in the mind, and the careful arrangement of the features so that nothing visible announces what the mind is doing. Two parallel tasks, both ongoing, neither chosen. Here's the thing about the face you have been holding. It is not dishonesty. That is the reframe that this chapter is offering, quietly, without insisting on it. The maintained jaw, the stillness, the carefully calibrated breath that does not become audible. None of that is deception. It is a form of care you are extending in the only direction available tonight, which happens to be inward. You are protecting yourself from the additional complexity of a conversation you are not ready to have. You are keeping the surface still while the interior does its necessary and enormous work. The performance is not a lie. It is a door you have closed for reasons that make sense, that you can open when you are ready, at a time that is not 3 a.m. beside the person the secret is about. Their breathing arrives at its steady interval, unchanged. The cold below your ribs pulses once, slowly, and settles. The ceiling holds its position overhead, the same ceiling it has always been, requiring nothing, offering nothing. Simply there. You are allowed to be a person who is holding their face together right now. That is not weakness. It is the specific, unglamorous grace of someone who has decided, without quite deciding, to get through this hour before the next one. The ceiling can hold your attention a little longer. It has nothing else to do tonight. And neither, it seems, does the mind, which is why the memory keeps coming back. You know the one, a specific evening, a dinner maybe, or something said in passing on an ordinary night, a laugh at the right moment, a sentence that landed warmly, a moment that felt, at the time, exactly like what it appeared to be. The mind has been returning to it all night, not because you called it, because the mind, which is doing the most loyal and least useful work of its career right now, believes that if it runs the sequence one more time, slowly enough, it will find the exact frame where the lie was already present. The exact moment the real version and the performed version came apart. The seam, the edge. It has run the sequence many times now. It has not found the edge. Here is what is happening to the memory itself. It is beginning to lose resolution. This is what happens to anything examined too closely for too long. The details start to flatten. The warmth drains out. The specific quality of the laugh becomes a general idea of a laugh. You are not misremembering. You are over-remembering, which is its own kind of damage. The memory is being worn down much crossing, the grass gone, the ground compacted, nothing growing there anymore because you have been back and forth across it too many times tonight. Their breathing arrives at its steady interval beside you, unchanged, unhurried, the sound of a person with no outstanding business in this dark. The cold below your ribs pulses once in its slow, sourceless way. The ceiling holds its position, and somewhere in the margins of all of it, the memory runs again. The table, the light, the sentence, and arrives at the same place it always arrives, the moment just before you knew, which looks, from the inside, exactly like a moment in which everything was fine. Here is the thing the investigation cannot accept, and that this chapter is willing to say plainly: you will not find the start of the lie by watching the memory again. Not because your attention is insufficient, because the lie was designed to have no edges. That is what makes a lie of this kind survivable for the person telling it. It is built to be seamless, to sit flush against the true thing, to cast no shadow visible from inside the relationship. You were not supposed to find it from the inside. You found it from the outside, through information that arrived from elsewhere, and that is the only way it was ever going to be found. The memory contains a person performing truth. The performance was the lie, and a performance that convincing leaves no visible seam in the footage. The mind can stand down from this particular search, not because the question does not matter. It does, and it will still matter tomorrow, and the day after that, but because the answer is not in the memory. It was never going to be in the memory. The memory was not where the lie lived. The glass on the floor has not moved. It has been sitting there, doing nothing useful, since the 30 seconds after you put the phone down. It is possible to stop looking and still know what you know. And somewhere in the settling after that, you may notice something that has been true for a while without being named. You have gone somewhere the room cannot follow. The sheet is still against the back of the arm, faintly cool, unchanged, carrying the texture of a night that began without incident. Earlier tonight, it was the surface of the before, the thing the body was resting in when the night still had no information in it. Now it is something different. It is still there, and you have nearly stopped feeling it. Not because it moved, because you did. Not physically. You have barely moved all night, but inward. The contact between skin and sheet has become distant, muted, like a sound heard through a closed door. The sheet is where it always was. You are somewhere further in. This is not dissociation in the clinical sense, though it may feel adjacent to it. It is something more specific to tonight, to this particular information, to what happens when the mind is running a process so large that the surface signals, texture, temperature, the faint coolness of cotton, simply do not have the bandwidth to register the way they normally would. Everything available has been redirected. The sheet is still sending its signal. The signal is just not arriving with any force. Notice the cold below the ribs, still present, still pulsing at its slow interval. Notice their breathing, arriving at its steady pace beside you, completely unaltered. And notice that you are aware of both of these things from a slight remove, as if the part of you that is tracking the room is doing so from a step back from where you usually stand inside yourself. The room is there. You are also there. But the usual closeness between you and the surface of things has shifted. Here is what that shift actually is, because it deserves a name that is not alarm. It is consolidation. When something of this scale arrives, information that rewrites the interpretation of a period of your life, delivered in a single evening with no preparation, the part of you that processes it requires every resource available, and so the resources pull inward. The skin goes quieter. The surface goes distant. The sheet becomes something you can identify but not quite feel, because feeling it fully would cost something that is currently spoken for. This is not shutdown. It is the opposite of shutdown. It is everything working at full capacity on something that cannot be rushed, cannot be resolved tonight, and cannot be shared with the person whose breathing you can hear 3 feet away and who does not know you are awake. There is no requirement to come back to the surface. The sheet will still be there, cool, unchanged, carrying its ordinary texture, when the interior work has progressed far enough that the surface is available again. That is not tonight's task. Tonight's task is simply to be where you are, which is somewhere enormous, doing something that has no name yet, but is not nothing. The glass on the floor has gone quiet too. It is not asking to be picked up. It has simply been there, doing its small, faithful nothing since the hands put it there hours ago. You are somewhere it cannot follow either. That is all right. And now there is something that needs to be said directly, because this chapter is where the fear underneath everything else finally surfaces, and it deserves to be met without ceremony. The cold below the solar plexus. Feel it for a moment. Not as the cold of a system rerouting everything it has to process something it was not built to process alone, as a physical fact to be identified and named, but differently, because this chapter is asking a harder question about it. The cold is not new. Lie with that for a moment. It is not new. It has been here longer than tonight. Longer than the photograph, longer than the 30 seconds after you put the phone down, if you are honest, and you are, which is the thing that makes all of this so much harder than it would be otherwise. There were moments before tonight when something in you registered a frequency you could not explain, a slight shift in the atmosphere of a room, a sentence that landed 1 degree off from where it should have. A moment you noted and then set aside, because the alternative to setting it aside was a disruption you were not prepared to face. The cold was running then too, quietly, in the background, at a level too low to name. Here is the fear this chapter is willing to say out loud, because you have been living alongside it all night without being able to say it. If some part of you already knew, if the cold was already present, if the body was already managing something before the mind confirmed it, then the question that arrives at 3 a.m, in the dark, beside the person whose breathing has not changed, is this: does that make you responsible for what you did not stop? It does not, but the fear that it does is real, and it is sitting in the room, and it needs to be looked at before it can be set down. The glass on the floor. Think about what the hands did in those 30 seconds. Got up, filled it, placed it on the floor on your side, away from theirs, before there was a single conscious thought directing any of it. The hands knew before you gave them the information officially. They were already managing, already making small, private adjustments to account for something the mind had not yet agreed to hold. This is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of attunement so precise, so finely calibrated to the specific person beside you, that it registered discrepancy at a level below language, below decision, below the moment of choosing to know or not to know. The cold, the glass on the floor, the breath that changed while theirs did not. These are not signs that you were complicit in being lied to. They are signs that you had learned, over time, to pay attention to this person with an accuracy most people never develop for anyone. You were not asleep to what was happening. You were so awake to them, so practiced at reading the precise texture of their presence, that you felt the change before you could name it. That is not the characteristic of someone who failed to pay attention. It is the characteristic of someone who loved carefully, specifically, with their whole instrument turned toward one person. The cold is a record of that, not an indictment. And with that settled, something else becomes possible. Something this chapter is ready to offer, quietly, without insisting on it. The photograph, the one you put the phone down on earlier today, before this night began in full. You looked at it long enough to feel the disorientation, the face that did not recognize itself, not because it had changed, but because it still believed what it believed at the moment the picture was taken. 6 months ago, before the information arrived, you set the phone face down and have not looked at it since. And the phone has been there, on the mattress, or on the floor, or wherever it ended up, carrying it, patient, not asking anything. Here's the question this chapter wants to sit with. What exactly was wrong with the person in that photograph? The answer, looked at without the distortion that grief and shock apply to everything they touch, is this: nothing. The person in the photograph had received no information that would have changed their face. They were not performing happiness or trust or love. They were in possession of all the information available to them at that moment, and they were responding to it accurately. The smile, if there was a smile, was real. The ease, if there was ease, was proportionate. The person in the photograph was not being fooled. They were being lied to, which is an entirely different condition, one that locates the error somewhere other than in them. The jaw has softened fractionally, not released, not gone, but slightly less maintained than it was an hour ago. Notice that. The cold below the ribs pulses once, slower than before, and settles. Something in the last 2 chapters has done some quiet work. Here is what the photograph actually recorded. A person paying attention to the information they had. That is what the face in it was doing, orienting toward what was present and real, responding with the accuracy of someone who trusted their own perception, and the perception, as far as they could tell, was sound. The love in the photograph was not a mistake. It was a correct reading of what was available. The information that would have changed the reading was being withheld. That is not a failure of attention. It is the consequence of someone else's careful, sustained, deliberate concealment. The person in the photograph is the same person who got up in the 30 seconds after putting the phone down and filled a glass of water and placed it on the floor because they could not stand to set it anywhere that was also theirs. The same person who has been lying awake in this specific dark for hours, holding something that requires two people, alone. The same person who held their jaw in position all night so that the surface would remain undisturbed. The face in the photograph and the face on the pillow right now are the same face. One of them simply has more information. More information does not mean a different person. It means the same person, further along. The photograph did not capture someone who failed to see clearly. It captured someone in the middle of a story whose ending had not yet arrived. That is all it was. That is all that face was doing. Being present in a moment that had not yet shown its other side. That person is not gone. They are the ones still here, awake, in this room, having seen the other side now. And the body, which has been managing so much for so long tonight, is beginning to show the first signs of a limit it did not choose to reach. Notice the breath. Earlier tonight, the held exhale was the shape of a secret being kept, the breath stopping partway as an act of containment, of keeping the surface still while the inside ran its enormous process. That was the held exhale as decision. What is happening now is different. The breath is still stopping partway, but it is stopping a fraction later than it was an hour ago. Not because you have decided to release anything, because the muscles that have been maintaining the hold are approaching the edge of what muscles can do when asked to sustain a position for this many hours without relief. The jaw is still slightly maintained. The cold below the solar plexus is still present, still pulsing at its slow interval, still not reachable by the blanket or the warmth of the room. Their breathing continues at its steady pace beside you, unchanged, ordinary, the sound of a person whose night is proceeding without incident. All of this is still true, and underneath all of it, the breath is beginning. Not dramatically, not with any sense of arrival, to go slightly further before it catches. This is the body's mercy, and it operates entirely without your permission. You did not decide to begin releasing. You have not resolved anything. The investigation has not concluded. The cold has not lifted. The person beside you has not woken up and become someone who accounts for what they did. None of the conditions that would justify a softening have been met, and yet the breath is softening anyway, because the architecture of sustained tension has a ceiling, and the body has been running at that ceiling for hours, and it is beginning on its own to find the small adjustments that allow continuation without collapse. There is something worth staying with in this, The fact that the body does not wait for permission to begin this process. It does not consult the mind about whether conditions are appropriate for even the smallest release. It simply reaches the limit of what it can maintain and begins, fraction by fraction, to let the hold become slightly less precise. The exhale that has been stopping halfway all night is not stopping quite as early now. This is not a choice. It is what happens when a system that has been running at full capacity for long enough reaches the outer edge of its capacity and begins the automatic process of redistribution. You are not letting go. Nothing is being let go of. The pain is where it was. The knowledge is where it was. The glass is still on the floor, untouched. Room temperature now, having sat there through all these hours without being needed for anything. The wardrobe is in its place, the curtain edge, the corner, and the breath goes out, just slightly further than before, and comes back, and the next one goes a little further still. Not resolution, not peace, just the body, doing what the body does when it has been asked to hold something too large for too long, finding, without announcement, the first millimeters of a margin it did not have an hour ago. And in that margin, quieter than everything that came before it, the memory arrives again. The same evening, the dinner, or whatever it was, a table, a particular light, something said that landed well. You have been through this memory many times tonight, running it for evidence, looking for the seam where the real version and the performed version came apart. That was the memory as crime scene. This time it arrives differently, not called, not deliberately retrieved. It simply surfaces, the way memories do when the investigation has finally exhausted itself. And what it brings with it this time is not the sharp forensic attention of earlier, but something quieter, almost reluctant. The particular quality of an image that the mind has stopped trying to use and is simply, for a moment, seeing the laugh. If there was a laugh, and there was, you can still hear the specific register of it, the timing, the way it arrived without effort. It was a real laugh. You can feel the difference between a performed laugh and a real one. And that one was real. The warmth at the table was real. The ease, if there was ease, was proportionate to what was present and visible. The warmth you felt was not a fabrication of your own making. It was a response to something that was actually there. Here is the thing the mind has been refusing to hold, because holding it requires holding two contradictory facts at once, which is the specific cognitive demand that betrayal makes, and that no one adequately prepares you for. The evening was real, and it was also false, both simultaneously. The realness of the laugh does not cancel the falseness of the context, and the falseness of the context does not cancel the realness of the laugh. A lie lived inside a real evening. The evening did not become a lie because a lie was present inside it. These two things coexisted, the way two people can coexist in the same room with entirely different information about what the room contains. Their breathing arrives at its steady interval. The cold below the solar plexus pulses once, slowly, and this time, notice this, it settles slightly lower in the exhale than it did before. Not gone, just a fraction further from the surface. The glass on the floor has been sitting there through all of it, through the forensic replaying and the trying to locate the edge, and it is still there now, unchanged, holding its patient nothing. The warmth you felt at that dinner belonged to you. It was generated by you, in response to what was real in the room, the person, the moment, whatever was genuine in it. Their deception cannot reach backward and take that warmth away, because that warmth was yours. It lived in you. It was real because you were real in it, and you are the only one whose realness in that evening is not in question tonight. The evening was real. You were real in it. Both of those things can stay. And so can you, which is what this chapter is about, quietly, without making too much of it. The fact that you are still here. Listen to the breathing in this room. Their breathing is where it has been all night, steady, unchanged, arriving at its unaltered interval. The sound of a person for whom this night has been simply a night. And yours, notice this, yours is different from what it was 3 hours ago. Not in the way you might hope, not slower from peace, not released from understanding, slower from something more honest than either of those. The plain physical arithmetic of a body that has been holding maximum tension for long enough that maximum tension is no longer available as an option. The breath that was shallow and managed and held high in the chest at the beginning of this night has begun, without your permission, to descend, not toward calm, toward the ordinary territory of a body that is simply running out of the resource required to keep it elevated. The two rhythms in this room are not the same. They are closer than they were. That closing is not resolution. It is exhaustion doing the work that resolution has not done, which turns out to be some of the same work, arrived at by a less dignified route. You have been awake for hours. You know this not because you have been tracking time, but because of the accumulated evidence of it, the glass on the floor, which you have not touched since you placed it there, which is room temperature now, which has been sitting in its position through all of it, through every chapter of this night, faithfully doing nothing. Hours are in that glass. The night is in that glass. The specific passage of time that has occurred while you lay here processing something you did not ask to receive. Here is the thing that is difficult to feel from inside a night like this, because from inside it, the night feels like stasis, like being stuck, like nothing moving, like the same moment repeating. You have been making it through this whole time. Each hour that has passed is an hour you were present for, awake, carrying what you are carrying, not falling apart in any of the ways you may have feared you would when the information first arrived. The investigation ran, the cold was present, the jaw was held, the breath was managed, and you did all of it, not gracefully, not without cost, but continuously, without stopping, which is what making it through actually looks like from the inside, not triumphant, just ongoing. The ceiling has been overhead for all of it, the wardrobe in its place, the curtain edge, the corner, every shape exactly where it was when this night began, unchanged, having registered nothing And you are here in this unchanged room, having registered everything and still here. The bed is what it is. The knowledge is what it is. Nothing has been resolved, and you are not at peace. And their breathing arrives at its steady interval beside you, and yours has begun, very slightly, without announcement, to cost a little less than it did. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, the whole of it. And somewhere in the arriving at that, without announcement, the jaw has shifted, not released, not dropped, shifted fractionally. The way a held position changes when the muscle maintaining it reaches the end of what sustained contraction can do. The jaw has been in its maintained position since the beginning of this night, not clenched, not painful, simply held at the angle of a face that has been arranged continuously for the possibility of being looked at. Hours of that. The specific effort of performing a sleeping face while being entirely, alertly awake. And now, without a decision being made about it, the muscles have reached the place where maintaining the position costs more than the position is worth, and the jaw has moved a fraction of a millimeter toward where it would be if no one were beside you. This is not peace arriving. The pain is where it was. The knowledge is where it was. Their breathing continues at its steady interval, unchanged, untroubled. The sound of someone whose night has been simply a night, and yours is still different from it, still carrying the residue of hours of careful management. None of what made this night what it was has changed. The jaw released for the same reason a hand eventually opens after being held closed for too long. Not from resolution, not from comfort, but from the simple mechanical fact that muscles are not designed to hold a single position indefinitely, and the body, which has been performing for hours on behalf of a mind that could not afford to stop, has made a decision the mind did not make. There is something worth noticing in what just happened, because it is easy to miss in the small scale of it. The face you have been holding all night was not held for nothing. It was held because the alternative, to let the face do what it would do without the arrangement, in the dark, beside the person the secret is about, carried a cost you were not ready to pay. The performance was a form of protection, not dishonesty, not weakness. The face of someone managing an enormous thing in a space that did not allow for the full expression of it, because the full expression of it was not available at 3 a.m. in this particular room. And now the performance is becoming, at the level of the jaw, slightly less mandatory, not because the thing being managed has resolved, because the sustained effort of managing it has reached its natural limit, and the body has registered this before the mind did, the way the body has registered everything tonight before the mind was ready. The cold below the solar plexus is still pulsing at its slow interval. The glass on the floor is still where it was, untouched, room temperature, patient in its uselessness. The wardrobe stands in its exact position, the curtain edge, the corner. The jaw rests a fraction lower than it has all night. The night never required the performance. It was always going to hold whatever face you offered it. It is holding it now. The the face that has stopped performing, which turns out to look a great deal like the face of someone who is almost, not quite, approaching the outer edge of sleep. And in that almost sleep, in the loosening that comes just before the threshold, the hand moved. You may not have noticed it happening. That is the nature of it. The hand did not consult you. It did not weigh the situation, did not account for what you now know, did not factor in the glass on the floor, or the breath you have been managing all night, or the cold that has been pulsing at its slow interval since before this night had a name. The hand simply moved, the way it has moved on however many nights before this one, across the sheet toward the other side of the bed. The same motion it has made countless times, in sleep, in half sleep, in the early morning before consciousness has fully arrived. A motion so trained, so deeply written into the sequence of being in this bed that it runs below the level of decision. The mind caught it. Of course it did. The mind has been vigilant all night, and it registered the reach, and something in it recoiled, the sharp, electric recoil of a person who knows what they know and suddenly finds the body acting as if it does not. The hand was returned, or it stopped, or it arrived somewhere on the sheet that was not destination and stayed there. However it resolved, the mind intervened, and the moment passed, and you are lying here now with the aftermath of it. This is the most exposed moment of the entire night, not the finding out, not the lying here unable to sleep. This, the body moving in the dark towards someone the mind is trying to hold differently, the habit running while the guard was briefly down. There is a shame that arrives with it, immediate and specific, the feeling that the reach is a kind of betrayal of yourself, evidence of something you should have more control over, proof that you are not as clear-eyed about this as you have been trying to be. It is not any of those things. Here is what it actually is: information about what was built here. The reach happened because reaching for that side of the bed is something you have done so many times, over so long a period, in so many states of consciousness and unconsciousness, that it has become structural. It is not located in the part of you that knows what you know. It is located somewhere older than tonight, somewhere that was trained across hundreds of nights that preceded this one, by something that was real enough to train it. The hand reached not because it has forgotten. It reached because the habit was built from something genuine, and genuine things build deep, and what is built deep does not reorganize itself in a single night simply because the night brought information that changes everything above it. Their breathing continues at its unaltered pace. The cold below the solar plexus pulses once, steady, slow. The hand is where it is now. The reach was the body being loyal to what it learned. That loyalty is not the problem. It is, in its way, the record of something that was real. And the record is still here, and so are you, lying in the same position you have been lying in for hours, in the same room, in the same dark that has not updated. You have not moved, not for a long time now. Earlier in the night, the stillness was a strategy, the held position of someone who understood that moving would wake them, waking them would begin something you were not ready for. That stillness had a purpose. It was costing something and producing something. The surface, intact. The performance, maintained. The night, contained. That is not what the stillness is now. What it is now is simpler and harder to name. The body has used what it had. The processing that has been running since the moment you put the phone down, the investigation, the replaying, the cold pulsing below the ribs, the jaw held for hours, the breath managed and released and managed again. All of it has drawn from something, and what it has drawn from is finite, and the account is approaching its floor. The stillness that remains is not strategic. It is what is left when strategy has exhausted itself. The body is not choosing not to move. It simply does not have what moving requires. Their breathing arrives at its steady interval. Yours has slowed further, not toward peace, not toward anything that could be named resolution, but toward the slower rhythm of something running on what remains after a very long night. The cold below the solar plexus is still present, but its pulses have lengthened. The intervals between them are wider than they were. Something is decelerating, not ending, not resolving, simply winding toward a lower register. The glass on the floor has been there since the beginning. It has held its position through every chapter of this night without being asked to do anything, without being picked up, without being useful in any of the ways a glass of water is supposed to be useful. It has simply been there, doing the only thing available to it, staying where it was placed. There is something in that, the faithfulness of an object that has no choice but to remain, that is not entirely unlike what you have been doing. The stillness is not a decision anymore. It is the shape the night has arrived at, in you, after everything it has moved through. You are not holding it. It is holding you, or more precisely, it is simply what remains when everything that was maintaining the alternative has finally spent itself. The night never required the vigil. It did not ask you to stay awake, to investigate, to hold the jaw, to manage the breath, to lie motionless for hours beside someone who does not know what this night has contained. You did all of that because you were in it, because it was happening, because there was no other way to be present to something this large. And now the being present has reached a place that looks, from the outside, from the position of the wardrobe, the curtain edge, the corner, the glass, like simple stillness. From the inside, it is the first quiet this night has had that is not maintained. That is enough. That is finally enough. And while you have been arriving at enough, the glass on the floor has been doing something you did not ask it to do. The water in it is no longer cold. It was cold when you filled it. You filled it in the 30 seconds after you put the phone down, in those first purposeless minutes when the hands needed somewhere to go and the tap was the nearest available task. The water was cold then, the specific cold of water that has just left the pipe. Colder than the room, colder than the hand that held the glass. You placed it on the floor and have not touched it since. And the room, which has been at its ordinary temperature all night, has been doing what rooms do to cold things left inside them. It has been, degree by degree, without asking, bringing the water to its own temperature. The glass is now the same warmth as everything else in here. The room has claimed it. You did not notice this happening. You could not have. You were elsewhere, doing the enormous work of this night. But it happened. Hours of it happened. The water moved through every temperature between cold and room temperature while you lay here, and each of those temperatures was a small increment of time that passed. And all of those increments added up to hours, and those hours are now behind you. This is the thing that is difficult to feel from inside a night like this one, where the experience is of being suspended, pinned to a single moment, the moment of finding out, cycling through it again and again while the investigation ran and the cold pulsed and the jaw held and the breath was managed and released and managed again. From inside that suspension, time does not feel like it is moving. It feels like the same moment, repeated. But the glass knows otherwise. The glass has been keeping an accurate record while you were elsewhere, and the record says, hours have passed. The night has moved. You are not where you were when this began. Their breathing continues. Yours has slowed to something that no longer requires the effort it required at the start of this. The cold below the solar plexus, still present, still there, has lengthened its intervals to something almost imperceptible. The wardrobe stands in its place, the curtain edge, the corner, all of it exactly as it was, and all of it several hours further into the night than it was when you first became aware of lying here. The glass did not warm because anything was resolved. The water reached room temperature through the simple, patient physics of two different temperatures existing in proximity until they are no longer different. The room was always going to absorb the cold eventually. It did not need your participation. It did not need the lie to be understood, or the fear to be named, or the investigation to conclude. It just needed time. And time has been passing whether or not it felt like it was. Some of this night is already behind you. The glass knows. The water knows. You are further through than it feels like you are. And the ceiling knows this, in the way that ceilings know things, which is to say, it has simply been overhead the entire time, unchanged, holding its position while everything beneath it went through what it went through. Look at it, or notice that you are already looking at it, have been looking at it for a long time now, the way the eyes settle on the one surface in a room that makes no demands. The wardrobe is theirs too, partly. The curtain edge frames a window you have both looked through. The space beside you is not something the eyes can rest on tonight, but the ceiling has no ownership, no history, no information about what happened in this room. It was here before you knew. It is here now. It will be here tomorrow, and the day after that, in exactly the same position, asking exactly nothing of whoever is lying beneath it. You have been looking up at it for hours. At some point tonight, it became the primary geography of this night, the thing the eyes return to between thoughts, between the investigating and the replaying, and the cold pulsing below the ribs and the breath being managed and released. The ceiling received all of it without response. It is very good at that. It has had a great deal of practice. Here is what the ceiling is not doing. It is not waiting for you to resolve the thing that happened in this room tonight. It is not tracking whether you have arrived at an understanding of what comes next. It has no investment in whether you figure out tomorrow, or next week, or what you will say, or what they will say, or any of the architecture of the days that have not arrived yet and are not, in fact, present in this room right now. Tomorrow is not here. The ceiling has never once contained it. The cold below the solar plexus. Notice that its interval has lengthened again, that the pulses are arriving slower than they were an hour ago, slower even than they were at the beginning of this chapter. Not gone, still there, but quieter. A process running at a lower capacity than it was at the start of this night. Because even enormous things that run in the background eventually consume what they were given and begin to idle. Their breathing arrives at its interval. Yours has become something that requires less management than it did. The jaw has been released for some time now. The hand that reached has been returned. The investigation that ran all night through the same corridor has, somewhere in the last hour, stopped finding the energy to run another pass. The ceiling continues overhead. Tomorrow will arrive with the same information this night contained, and you will be someone who slept before meeting it, which is not nothing. Tomorrow's questions do not require tonight's answers. They require tomorrow. Tonight required only that you be present to what was here, which you were, which you have been, which is the whole of what was ever going to be asked of this particular night. The ceiling is still there. That is enough to look at. And at some point while you were looking at it, something finished, not resolved, not concluded, finished in the way that a long effort finishes when there is simply nothing left to run it on. The investigation that kept returning to the same corridor has stopped mid-pass and not come back. The replaying has found the same image one too many times and set it down without ceremony. The mind that has been doing its most loyal and least productive work all night has reached the outer edge of what was available to it, and has, without announcement, stopped. Notice the stillness now. In chapter 17, it was something you could feel, the weight of not moving, the deliberate maintenance of a position, the specific gravity of someone who had used everything on the processing and arrived at immobility as a result. That stillness had a texture to it, a cost you could still locate. This stillness is different. It is not the stillness of effort. It is the stillness of something that has simply finished being otherwise. The body is no longer holding a position. It has arrived at one. The difference is that one of those requires something, and the other is just what is. Their breathing arrives at its interval. Yours, now, is arriving at something close to the same interval, not identical. Nothing about this night has produced identity between your experience and theirs, but closer. The breath gap that was the central wrongness at the beginning of this night, the gap only you could hear, has narrowed to something that would not, from outside this room, be distinguishable as a gap at all. This did not happen through understanding. It happened through hours, through the body finding, on its own, the slower rhythm that comes after everything else has been spent. The cold below the solar plexus, it is still there, if you look for it, less insistent, pulsing at an interval so long now that there is significant rest between each arrival. It has not resolved. It has simply run low on what was keeping it at its earlier intensity and dropped. The way everything that was running at full capacity tonight has dropped, not to zero, not to peace, but to the lower register of something that has done what it could do and is resting in what remains. The glass on the floor, the wardrobe, the curtain edge, the corner, all of it exactly as it was when this night began, and all of it, including you, several hours further through. Here is what has happened. Stated plainly, the body has made a decision the mind was not consulted about. It has decided that tonight has taken what tonight was going to take, and that what remains is for the night to have the last portion of it, not the portion where everything is understood, not the portion where a plan exists, the portion where the eyes, which have been open for a very long time, find that staying open is no longer a state they can sustain without significant effort, and that the effort is no longer available. The night was never asking you to figure it out. It was only ever asking you to get through it. You have. The room has too. It has held the investigation and the cold and the glass on the floor and the two different rhythms of two people breathing, held all of it without being asked, the way rooms do, without registering any of it, without updating, the wardrobe in its place, the curtain edge, the corner, the same room it was before you knew, and now it is also this, the room after, both true, neither announced. The thing that was never going to be resolved tonight has not been resolved. It is still here, and it will be here tomorrow, and that is not failure. That is just how large it is. The ceiling is overhead, has been overhead through all of it. The glass on the floor, room temperature now, full of water that traveled all the way from cold to this without anyone watching. The sleeping breath beside you, unchanged. Yours, slower now than it was. The ceiling, the wardrobe, the curtain, holding its edge of borrowed dark. In the kitchen of this apartment, the refrigerator makes its small, internal adjustment, a sound too quiet to name, the mechanism of an ordinary thing continuing its ordinary work, keeping what is inside at the temperature it was always going to keep it, not knowing what kind of night this has been, not needing to. The ceiling is still there. You are still here. The night has you.